Hello everyone, welcome to my watercolor painting channel. I'm just getting ready. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be painting together this barn owl, and I'm just waiting for people to join in. Um, I will explain and make a plan of what we're going to be doing together. And let me just first introduce myself. My name is Rita Gould, and I am a watercolor artist. I do live streams, online and offline workshops. You can join my Patreon and become my student, where on that platform I upload tutorials every other week, and mostly we painting together nature related illustrations, and I do some theory. Also, if you live in the UK, I do run some offline workshops, and I am trying to develop my YouTube channel. Unfortunately, with the work and everything, I just find it hard sometimes to keep it up with everything, apart from doing other social media. But I will try this year to push a little bit more for my YouTube channel, and I'll try to run more of these free workshops. And we're going to be painting nature together. So one of these first classes is today, and we're going to be painting this barn owl. So I've made this illustration a few weeks ago, and I am just gonna quickly say about supplies that we're going to be using today. So I already, as you can see, I transferred my paint, my line drawing to good quality watercolor paper. So I'm using Arches 300 GSM cold press paper. It's very important to use 100% cotton paper. And I already transferred it, and I attached, as you can see, just to the board. We're using masking tape around around all the sides. And so it's all ready to go. So how I set up my working space is I am right-handed, and I will set everything on the right-hand side. And I will have my paints, my water. You can't see water, but it's somewhere here. I also have a few brushes that we're going to be using. So they are different sizes. So I'm just going to put them around here. So I have my ceramic palette. Yeah, you can use either this one with wells or just a plate. So just a clean plate. I also will be using kneadable eraser. So you can buy this online, and it's really, really good eraser, which allows you to lift some pencil marks without damaging the paper. So it's really good stuff to use. So the brushes we're going to be using is a few sizes. So one, we'll be using brush size 12 to 10, or if you have 8. So I would say in the range between 8 and 12, and that brush we would just need to do the first layer when we will be working wet on wet. So wet on wet will mean that we apply water, and then we implement more and more colors while it's still wet. So that is one time that we will need bigger brush. For the rest of the time, we would just need brush size number 6, and then brush size number 3, and size 20 or 1 for adding details. And I will be using, as usual, affordable Cotman series Winsor & Newton paints. I also will be using their white gouache. I really recommend that one because I really like using it. It's a perfect gouache to add details. And I also have my spray. Yeah, so I normally, for all my workshops and to work with beginners, I always recommend people using pans instead of tubes of paints, because most beginners use way too much of the color and not enough water. So by having dry paints and adding more and more water to reactivating them, you actually better off using it that way rather than rather than squeezing it out and then use it like acrylics, where you will be overusing color, and with watercolors, water is essential. So I do recommend, if you are having if you're using pans, I do recommend just to have a water, just to spray it prior to your painting. So I have them here, so let me just move it, and then you just spray on top a few times, and in 5 minutes they will be ready, and the colors will be a lot brighter because the water is already gonna go inside. So I also set everything, like I was saying, on the right hand side, so you will just about to see my tissue. So it makes sense when you're working. Let me just demonstrate you. It makes sense when you're working. So imagine if that I am picking some color, trying it on the palette, and then I need to unload my brush and then wash it. If I had paint on the other side here, and I will be traveling with my brush all the time across my board, the accidents are very likely to happen in this case. That's why I always set everything on one side. It just allows me to avoid mistakes. That's all, because I'm quite messy. If you are left-handed, it makes sense for you to just change it on the other side. So first of all, I hope that you already applied your good quality paper to the board and just put this tape round. It just helps with avoiding too much buckling. So buckling is when your watercolor paper becomes very wavy. So if I will show you like this, so even though that one was attached to the board, it's still, because I used quite a lot of water on the paper, it's still buckled. So it's still a little bit wavy, but it can be easily fixed. So but if I haven't used it, it would be like way too wavy. So I am always attaching it to the board, and most of the time with the amount of water I use, it's enough. Yeah, so let's begin. So first of all, I'm just going to quickly show you and say where to start. So with watercolor, we're working from light to dark, because watercolor is translucent. So it means it's semi-transparent. So if I can just demonstrate you this piece of paper. So as you can see, those layers, yeah, so they are going on top on one another, and you can see through them. And the consistency of these layers is different as well. So, but you still can see it. It's just because watercolor always needs a lot of water, and it's semi-see-through. So it makes sense to start in watercolor with very light colors, and then building up tonal values with time on top, making it darker and darker and darker. So like here, I normally, for the first layer, if you look, all these light areas, it was done in one go, so in one layer. So I would apply water to the whole area of the owl, and then I would use slightly smaller brush and very light colors to add wet on wet. Then I will let it dry, and only after that we will darken tonal values. So if I show you the chart of rough tonal values, so you can see that we're starting very, very light. So it's almost water with a little bit of pigments. So normally first layers are made with very light colors and with a lot of water. And as you are progressing, but you will be working wet on dry, you add in more and more tonal values. Why are they so important? Because in watercolor, we are building values by reducing the amount of water and increasing the amount of paint. And we can't paint white on top, because in traditional watercolors you don't use white colors, so you are making this white. So or leaving it white. So for example, with our example, so we have barn owl, and if you squint your eyes a little bit, you could see that these areas are quite light. However, I painted the whole owl very lightly, and but I left those areas very light so I would have a good contrast. So normally a good watercolor painting always will have the range of tonal values and the good contrast between very dark areas and very light areas. So if you don't have this range, sometimes it just won't look as good. It won't look as harmonic. So it is very important to keep at least 3 or 4 different tonal values when you paint with watercolor. So how we're going to do it? So first I want you to, so I will put my painting over here. So first, I would say that in watercolor, again, the end result is that you shouldn't really see graphite marks. So normally you would need to take that off. So I will roll my kneadable eraser like this. And you can see that it just takes some paint off. Not paint, sorry, pencil marks. But I won't do it too much so you can see. Yeah, but normally I almost remove all of it, so it will be very, very high. So, like I said, we will prepare first colors, and it will be very, very light colors. So, with watercolor, I've found working with beginners is that concept of using and understanding consistency is very important, and it does help a lot of people. So, you know, there is a method that called tea to butter consistency. Let me find the file. Just a sec. I had it somewhere. Yeah, I found it. So in watercolor, you can follow that method, and it's called tea to butter consistency, tea to honey consistency. Sometimes, no, not to butter. Sorry, tea to honey consistency. I mean, I have a little bit less of these squares here, but if you can imagine the food or the drink that mimics the same consistency. So if you imagine tea, not with milk, but for example, tea. So let's try. So it will be very, very transparent. So you can see it will have a little bit of color, but mostly it will have water in it. Yeah. So normally tea consistency will be used for first layers to keep all these layers light. Yeah. And then with, for example, coffee or milk, you would add more color, and it will be a bit more saturated. Yeah, still quite runny. Yeah, so that will be like coffee. And it's normally used for the second layer, wet on dry, wet on wet. And then we would use, let me get some tissue. And then we would use, for example, cream. So I don't need much water. It's mostly pigment, yeah. Cream. So it will mimic cream. So it will be almost like cream. Yeah. And I mean, in my techniques, I almost don't use it. So I use something in between cream and honey. So imagine honey, it's sticky. It doesn't really, if you put on a spoon and then on a paper, it will be just almost a little bit of dry brushing, yeah, so very thick. So in my techniques, I don't really use honey, so but I use it in between to add final details. So that concept actually really helps people to understand how much color you would need to use for successful painting, for to paint like first layer. And so I will repeat myself. So for the first layer, we will be using we will be using water and tea consistency, but I will comment on every step that we're going to make today. So first of all, I want you to take your brush. I will be using brush size number 8, but again, it looks bigger. So you need a brush that will allow you to quickly cover the whole area of an owl with water. So you watch me. So I will be just putting water on the whole area, ignoring all the eyes. My water's slightly gone a little bit orangey, but it's fine. So I'm applying water. So how much water do you need to use, and how to see how much water do you need? So normally with beautiful watercolor bleeds, for the first layer, you need quite a lot of water. You don't need paddles on your paper, but if you can just take your artwork and then you kind of tilt it a little bit, and you can see that consistency of the water is almost like here. This is the right consistency. I would say that here is a bit too much, so that's why I'm pulling this water down and spreading it. So you don't need paddles, but also you need to go all the way to the edge with your brush, because remember that paint goes everywhere where you apply water. So if I can just demonstrate it. So I've painted the pear by just applying water first round, and then I added color. And I added it only around the pear, but because this whole area was applied with water, color traveled all the way. That's why it's very important, if you're painting something and you want color to go all the way to the edge, make sure that you're going to check all the edges, yeah, they went all the way. Sometimes you can just tilt it and see. Whenever it's dry, that means you need to add water. I am painting on A4, but the size of the owl is like A5. It's just I placed it in the middle. So I'm very, very gently applying water, and you can see I can check it. So now it's activated. And then I don't need this big brush, so I will mix some colors by using my brush size number 6. And what I want to add for the first layer, I will use Prussian Blue or any cold blue that you have. And I will use a very diluted version. So it's almost like water with a little bit of blueness. And then I will add this straight away, wet on wet. So you can see that because it's wet, because it's evenly covered, I don't need to blend it. I don't need to make any soft edges. I will be just applying it wet on wet, and the color will spread. You can see, so I'm just adding one color at the time. So now we're working with Prussian Blue, or you can use any cold blue, yeah? Consistency is almost water to tea, so very, very transparent. And you can see I'm not feeling it with one color, just a little bit. Just trying to move so it won't reflect as much. So yeah, a little bit of blue color, wet on wet. You can see how transparent it is, yeah? And then I'm gonna wash my brush, and then next color that I'm using called Permanent Rose. Again, I will use a very light version of Permanent Rose. So it will be very, very light, you can see that it's almost water, but I know that on white paper it will have a slight undertone of pink. And then I will be adding a little bit of permanent rose, permanent rose. As you notice that I'm not trying to be very scientifically accurate with painting a barn owl or any other nature-related illustrations that I do. However, I am trying to paint it so it will be recognizable. So I simplify a lot of stuff, but also it just makes me feel in control, that I'm deciding what colors I'm going to be using, and I'm still following tonal values and the main rules in watercolor, but I just do it in my own way. So for example, with a barn owl, and I will show you later how you can be more creative with colors, because we're going to do the first layer and then we will let it dry, and in the meantime I will be telling you to um, how to see colors. Yeah, so at the moment, so I added permanent rose wet on wet using my brush size number 6. Then what I do, I want to add a little bit of Dioxazine Purple. So it's that purple color. See, yeah. So just a little bit of that color, wet on wet, and under the head. And then a little bit here, a little bit there. So as you can see, I'm working on a quite wet paper, but I am also leaving gaps. So you can see that some gaps will be unfilled with color, but that's okay, because I want to have a picture, because barn owl, they have white feathers all over, and it depends on the environment around what makes it look and have all the different colors. So I am adding these colors and I'm keeping them light, thinking that with other layers I will make the wings and the face a lot more darker, so the white feathers will stand out, so it will be a good contrast. So for now I added Dioxazine Purple, permanent rose and Prussian Blue, so very, very light. I also will use a little bit of light red, so light red, just a bit. Just a bit of light red. You can see that I probably had way too much water here. Let me just tilt it. So you can see it's a bit too much. So this is the right amount of water, yeah? So it's glistening, but there is no puddles. So I'm adding light red, wet on wet, just a bit. So you can add light red and it will be a consistency of tea around the eyes. And I'm ignoring now the eyes because I know it will dry out a lot lighter. And I know that I will have to work on this area more. But for now, I'm just adding colors. Light red. So I am just adjusting the back of the owl with my brush when I'm lifting that water and then wiping it against the tissue, like so. So yeah. And then the last color that we're going to be using before we leave it to dry is called raw umber. So I will wipe these colors. Raw umber. And maybe just a little bit of yellow ochre. it will be sort of milk consistency. I will still use my brush size number 6 and I will still apply wet on wet. So mainly I will be adding it on the back of the owl, like so. And you can see there won't be any hard edges because it's wet. If you have an environment where it's drying out too quickly, I always advise to get a brush, big brush, make sure it's clean, dip it in the water, and in the areas where it's gone dry, you can run your brush to activate it evenly, and that's how you will end up without any hard edges. So it depends on the environment you're working with, because sometimes if you're sitting next to the radiator, it will dry unevenly, and it will you will have like cauliflower effect, because you will have like different microclimates on your artwork. So you can see that I'm adding raw amber with a little bit of yellow ochre, wet on wet, on both wings. And then I also will add this color at the top, sort of on the right hand side of the head, just a little bit. We are building the structure right now, and a little bit round the face. You can see that it's now beginning to look like a damp paper, so I have a lot more control of how quickly those bleeds are growing. Yeah, where you can look down and you can see that these areas, they are a little bit more, so they are wetter because the bleed is actually grew way too much. So what you can do, you can wash your brush, dump it against the tissue, and then you can just collect this extra pigment and just make sure that it's nice and blended well. The same as here. Just with my brush, I'm adjusting the wing. And then here I will run my brush to make it a little bit smoother. And here, and then on top. So I'm just moving the pigments and collecting some excess paint with just a slightly damp brush, like so. So this is my first layer, and what I'm gonna do is I will add a little bit more of Prussian Blue, because I feel like I want to increase that blue color. You don't have to do it, but I will show you. So I will use slightly smaller brush, so brush size number 1, and I will make sure that the consistency will still be tea to coffee, I would say. And I will apply it wet on wet. Just I want to a greater contrast, and I want to add more blue color. Again, remember, on cold press everything dries out a lot lighter, so I will just use I'll put this here. So I'm just using Prussian Blue. You can use the color, the cold blue that you have, but I do quite like using Prussian Blue. Yeah. So we have now all the colors for the first layer painted on. And I normally paint this one layer in like 5 minutes. It depends on the size. And I love leaving my artwork to dry out naturally. And it allows me, I'm not really a big fan of using a fan, because you can damage your artwork, or I don't know how to explain it, but I do feel that without using fan, you have more control over how evenly it's going to dry out. Where with a fan, sometimes when it's too hard or um, you can move even that water, because we have quite a lot of water for the first layer inside this painting, and I love leaving it to dry out naturally. It's just me, my preference, but in the meantime I will show you how you can try to see different colors, and how I will just give you a little bit more of a theory about how I approach painting birds and any nature related, how I paint white. And I also will show you a few books that I'm using sometimes for inspiration. So while it's drying out, so I'll put this on the side. So I found this really cool book, and I bought it on a car boot sale, and it cost me 70 or 80p, and I thought that was an amazing amazing gift. So I love using reference books for inspirations and for inspiration, and also for understanding what colors I might use when I paint certain animals. So you know that I am not going into hyperrealism. I'm trying to always use semi-realism, but at the same time I'm kind of trying to simplify it, but you will be able to still recognize and identify certain species, such as the owl, yeah, this barn owl, because I still use the colors that it has. So it still has this warm yellow, so like raw amber, yellow ochre. It still has white areas. It still has these reddish eyes, so red color next to the eyes, and how it looks, and the spots and the gray colors on back and the wings. So you still kind of making sure that people will see, and they will be able to identify, but you are a lot simplifying it, so it's not scientifically accurate, but at the same time you don't have to do it all the time scientifically accurate. I find it very boring to be honest. That's why I feel like I like working when I'm in control, when I'm deciding which colors I'm going to use and which colors, which detail I'm going to show, and I feel more powerful and more creative painting that way. So, but I'm just going to show you. So, in this book, for example, we have this barn owl, and I don't know if you can see that, but if you squint your eyes, you can see that there's a lot of gray color here, yeah, but also I can see some yellow color here, certainly like colder yellow color. And what these reference books, they sometimes, well, I feel that for beginners and people who are just beginning to work with color, it is more helpful to see how certain animal done with colors, so with watercolors or any sort of medium, rather than just on a picture, because sometimes it is hard to see it, and I do love using books like that. So I'm going to show you this book, and then I also have another one. Again, bought it in a charity shop, and I absolutely love it. So this is the book, and it has quite detailed information about all the species. So we have here this barn owl. Again, for me, it's a little bit too yellowish. But again, we have all the significant colors. So the gray and the gray wings, the black spots, and also these slightly pinkish legs. Yeah, so With the white, it depends on the environment around, which adds up the color to the white. So if you, let me just show you. It's a quick example. So for example, you do know and understand with your eyes that that flower is white. However, in watercolor, I didn't paint any, so I left white paper. That's how you can make white in watercolor, by leaving the white and adding some other colors around. So I've painted shadows here, so but they are not gray. So here I used some green color, some yellow color, some blue color, and some black color. So different ranges how you can make gray, and it depends on the environment round. So for example, if the environment round was a little bit more purplish or pinkish, it will affect the colors on the white petals of this flower. Yeah, so I will make sure that I will paint a few purple patches to just support this idea, because the colors, the white colors, they are kind of reading this information from the environment around. I hope that I explained it well. Also, painting white, you can create a greater contrast round. So that's why I painted here white round this flower to show that great contrast. And you can see and you can say that is a white flower. Yeah. The same as here with an owl. However, it was more done like in more creative way, and I added a little bit more of pinkish color, blue color, to make it look more creative, I would say. Right, what else I wanted to show you? So just wanted to show you about a little bit more about tonal values and how important it is to have good tonal values. For example, this kingfisher, you do understand by looking at kingfisher that this is a kingfisher because I used the right colors that kingfisher has. It has the right proportions. However, it's not scientifically accurate because it doesn't have all the details, and you don't have to paint all the details. Again, it's entirely up to you. But if you squint your eyes, you can easily identify light and dark areas. So for example, this is a very light areas, yeah? You know that source of light is coming probably from here, and it affects whole kingfisher, yeah? So it will have a darker size here, away from the source of light. And that's how you can decide what colors and what consistency you're going to use, knowing where's your source of light. You can either invent it and decide it before you paint, so by just drawing sun, or just keep it in your mind. Again, with this pencil, you can squint your eyes and you can see light areas, then half tones and dark areas. So lighter areas will be on the back, a little bit here, and then half tones will be there, and then we have darker areas. Yeah, combination of these tonal values and a good contrast, this is what makes good watercolor artwork. The same as with this bird. Yeah, so if you squint your eyes, it's not scientifically accurate. However, it has all the main tonal values, and it's done in more creative, artistic way. Yeah. Yeah, just want to show you. So if you squint your eyes, you can see where the light areas on pears, on the bird. will be very helpful if you will do tonal studies. So this is done with mushrooms, but sometimes you can help yourself to see values or decide how you want to make them. So it's up to you to decide. And so first of all, you decide in where's your source of light. So here I've got this little sun shining, so it will be hitting the mushroom. Yeah, so this will be a highlight, and this will be a lighter area on the mushroom of this shape. And then you deciding, so the shadow area will be over here, then adding details, half tones. So you are painting and making this tonal value study just to help yourself how you can use this information when you're going to be painting. So for example, I really recommend using exercises with one color, just one color. So for example, this tomato, you can see that I've used one color, and it was Prussian Blue, and I painted this tomato with only one color, but with different values and with different consistency. And I showed where we have highlights, where we have shadow areas, where we have reflected light. Yeah, so only main ones. I don't go into super detail, so I'm not a botanical artist where they have a very big range of different tonal values. So I am just using very basic one, so up to 6 different tonal values, I would say. And after I've painted it with one color, it's like a little tiny study. And then you are applying the same information, and you're painting tomato but with colors, but you're trying to keep the same area. So you would have highlights the same, yeah, you would have reflected lights, you would have darker areas, so like on a shadow area, so if you squint your eyes you will see it. Yeah, the same with this little apple. First, you can use just one color to understand where is the source of light, how to make it darker, how to build up the shape, and then you can do it with a color. So I really do recommend using one color to practice with understanding and how you can use tonal values. And how do we lighten tonal values? By water, using water. So whenever you want to lighten, you can just add water. That will be one of the pictures that we're going to be doing next, and this is puffing. And I wanted to talk about a more creative way of choosing colors. It was done on a different paper. So this one is Waterford, Sanders Waterford, and it's a brilliant paper too. With painting white and with understanding how you can apply information where this bird lives. So normally they live somewhere where it's not warm. So you certainly can think of penguins, for example. They would have the same coats and the same colors. So I've used here a little bit of lemon yellow, so cold yellow, a little bit of Dioxazine Purple, so a little bit of purple, and a little bit of Prussian Blue to just paint and use different colors to show the environment round. So it's normally quite cold, and I also had a picture somewhere here with a puffin. Let me just show you. That is a brilliant book. If you can find it online, I definitely recommend buying it if you're into painting birds. Yeah, this is puffing, yeah. So you can see here that I used quite a lot of gray, but it's just because you can't really see. But if you look at the different images, sorry, I hope you can see it. If you look at different images, for example, that bird, I can squint my eyes and I can read the information what it has on this white belly. So it might not be very noticeable on through the screen, but you can see, I can easily see yellow, blue, pink, and then grey with a little bit of purple as well. So again, it shows, and here, if I look, yellow, pink, purple, so the same colors. And understanding how you can use these colors and how you can see is going to help you a lot. So I really do recommend having a few books with different pictures, well, normally painted, because it will help you to understand which colors you might need to use. So this is a brilliant book. This is what I wanted to show you. I'm just pressing on my paper and I'm seeing that it's still a little bit wet. Right. Let me just prepare. I also wanted to share the brilliant book, and it's about how to draw. And if you don't know how to draw, I'd recommend getting a book like this and trying to repeat and then find just normal pictures and try to apply this knowledge to practice more drawing of nature. And it's breaking down everything to small parts, breaking down and then working on more details. For example, it starts with simple lines, yeah, with directions, and then you are building it more and more. I really like this book. I think it's very helpful. That is the book. Okay. So let's carry on. I'll put this away. So the second layer will be with a consistency of milk to cream, so in this range. So you can use either brush size number 6 or brush size number 3. I like to place bigger patches of color for the second layer using brush size number 6. So I will use, and I will make sure that I'm going to be using raw amber. So I'm mixing raw amber. You can see it's a lot more saturated in color. Yeah, you can add a little bit of yellow ochre in that mix. And then I'm washing my brush. Then I'm just going to wipe some colors on my palette. So first one is raw amber with yellow ochre. The second mix I will be using is just a little bit of burnt sienna. You can see that rusty color. Love this color. This one, really like Paul Rubens burnt sienna. Amazing color. And then I will be using burnt amber, so it will be a dark brown color. I will rename them again, so I'll make sure. So you can see that I've prepared three colors. So one is raw amber plus a little bit of yellow ochre. This is just burnt sienna, and this is burnt amber. And I'm going to be using my brush size number 6, and we were going to be working wet on dry. So I will start with using raw amber. So I'm loading my brush, and then I will be applying it to the wing. I will leave this area a little bit lighter, so I will start halfway on the wing, adding this color. Yeah, so once I've done it, I'm washing my brush, a little bit unloading it, and then just with water, I'm blending that color in. Then I'm washing my brush again, and then just with water, blending it in. You can see that I have like a soft edge here. The same here, so I'm washing my brush, it has a little bit of water, and then you apply it, and then you wiggle your brush, and then take some paint out to make it a little bit lighter. Yeah, the same here, so I'm starting by loading my brush with raw amber, and then I'm applying it wet on dry, sorry, to the wing on the left hand side. And then washing my brush, and then just wiggle my brush, making it lighter here on top of the wing. Like so. And then I will add the same color to the head. So it's raw amber and a little bit of yellow ochre. And then I'm washing my brush, unloading it a little bit, and then making like a light, softer edge. Not going to be very accurate here. And then a little bit from the other side, just a little bit of that raw amber, like so. Yeah, and then I will use the same color. I just need a bit more of raw amber, and I will apply round the face. So I will use my brush like a little bit sideways. Yeah, so I will use only tip of my brush, yeah, to paint this pointy area. So it's like a round the face area, and I'm working wet on dry. You can see there's no bleeding. That means the paper is dry. Quickly adding the color. I'm not trying to make all the brush strokes perfect because nature is wonky, and you can see that I left some distance in some between some of them, and I just trying to make it more realistic. So I missed some of the space between some of them. I joined, some of them are not. Some of them are a little bit more pointy, some of it not. Yeah. And so we know that we added this color first. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to work on more on like a darker tonal value. So I would use a little bit of burnt sienna, and I will just add it wet on wet a little bit on the wing and on the other wing. Yeah. And then to the top, just a little bit. As you can see that I'm working quite quick. Yeah, so all these areas are still wet. So I'm washing my brush, and I'm just gonna add a bit of burnt amber, so dark brown color. Gonna add it wet on wet. Wet on wet. Just by touching the paper. And then I will add this brown color on top as well, especially on the right hand side. Using my brush size number 6. And then on the other side as well. Like so. And then I will try to make space on my palette by just wiping that color on top. So I wiped it out. And I will work on halftones and darker values on white areas of the owl. So I will definitely use a little bit of Dioxazine Purple, so that purple color, and I will use a light red. I might mix them together a little bit to have this still quite light and dusty color. So the consistency, remember that we're working on a light area, so we don't need to go very dark. So we just need to add darker values, slightly darker values, but we can't use like honey consistency. So it still has to be quite light. So let me just try it first. Yeah, maybe just a bit more of Dioxazine Purple. And you can see that I'm adding this color just under the line, and it's a little bit bleeding of that brown color inside my purple mix, but that's fine. I'm keeping it quite light, so consistency is like tea to water, I would even say. And so I'm using Dioxazine Purple and a little bit of light red. And then we'll go up. And then I will paint the areas, the nose. So I will avoid the nose first. Yeah. And then I will use my brush to just apply that color. Still using a little bit of Dioxazine Purple and a little bit of light red. I'm just painting values around. Like so. I hope you can see it okay. Still using my brush size number 6, we're working wet on dry here. And then I will add some depth here. So you can see that on my painting, yeah, it is a bit darker. So we'll use still this Dioxazine Purple and light red. It's very transparent. Maybe just a bit more purple, so Dioxazine Purple with a little bit of brown. Consistency is like tea. So it looks a little bit pinkish even. Very light. You can see there is no hard edges, or no soft edges, sorry, because the paper is dry. So you can see it's very, very light. Even the brush strokes that I'm placing. So now I'm working on halftones. So if you squint your eyes, so we're adding another value. Like so. And then I would use a bit of light red and Dioxazine Purple here above the eye. And then the nose, like half of the nose. like so. Then I will get some Prussian Blue. Again, I had too much Prussian Blue here, so I don't need that much. I would add water to make this value lighter, so it will be still like tea consistency, so it's quite transparent. Yeah. Then I swap to my smaller size brush, so I'll be using brush size number 1. I load my brush and I will do a very transparent brush strokes on the dry areas using this Prussian Blue. Prussian Blue. You don't need to fill in all the areas, just it's nice combination of colors. They work really well together. And like I said, it's very, very transparent. And then you see that we have blue areas here. To support this idea and to make darker values, we can just place a few brush strokes using Prussian Blue, tea consistency with my brush size number 1. And then a little bit, we have this color here. So I will add that's too bright. Also with brush strokes, you can support the idea of how feathers are growing on the face. So for example, if you look, and I've made some of the lines on line drawing showing how the feathers and brush strokes supposed to go. For example, if you look at the face, you can see the brush strokes on top of the face, they're going like this, where if you look down, they are slightly curved to this side on that side, and then they're slightly curved to that side because they are repeating the natural pattern of the feathers on the face of the barn owl. The same as here, you can see that I'm supporting this idea that it expands, so that area is like a little bit bigger by not just placing brush strokes. Let me show you. So with the chest, I'm not placing my brush strokes like this. So, excuse me. So they are repeating the shape. So if we have a chest, to show the volume, to show how it expands, I'm not placing brush strokes like this. They are going like this. So they're going. They're expanding. So imagine if they have one point where they're coming from. Yeah. And there is the chest of an owl. I'm quite pleased with the colors on my owl, actually. I really like how it blended together. What I'm going to do next is that I will look at using one more color, and this is Permanent Rose. For mixing, I will swap to my brush size number 6 because I just need a bit more of Permanent Rose. Consistency still will be tea to water. You can see that it's blended a little bit with this purple, but not much. So I just want this pinkish color, and I will be using a little bit with purple, with Dioxazine Purple, and I will be using this permanent rose on its own. So you can see that here is like a purer color, and here I will be using purple plus pink. Yeah. So I will start with a lighter area with light color. I will be using my brush size number 1. And I will be applying this wet on wet and wet on dry. So you can see that where it's wet, it will be blending. And on areas where it's dry, it will have more definition. So it will be more pointy. So there won't be any bleeds. Just in a few places. Maybe a bit more. And then I will use Dioxazine Purple and Permanent Rose together. And add this here. And a little bit on the face. A few very light brush strokes on the face, like so. And then I also noticed that here I used a bit more blue color, so I would use a little bit of Prussian Blue with a little bit of light red, and I add this wet on wet because that patch is still wet. Yeah. So I used a little bit of light red and a little bit of Prussian Blue. Then I would use a little bit of raw amber. I will still use my brush size number 6, and I will add it wet on dry. So, and in my case, it will be slightly wet because I'm touching it with a finger to check. But I will use just a bit of that color, and the consistency will be milk, I would say. And I will add like dots using raw amber, like so. I'm trying to keep it light here because this is like a highlight we have on the head. I'm just with my brush just removing some of them to make it a lot lighter. And then next thing that I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna darken the areas with slightly darker color. So I'll be using burnt amber. So the consistency will be cream. So you can see that I always use my bigger size brush to mix colors. Then I'm washing my brush, and I'm gonna use slightly smaller brush. So I would say size number 3 will be ideal. And I'm just going to be using just the tip of my brush. So I'll start with burnt amber, and I will start by placing some brush strokes around the face. So Also, I'm keeping in mind that some of the areas are still a little bit wet, but I quite like the bleeds, so I don't mind if some of them will bleed. So you can see that I'm just working with the tip of my brush, applying just a little bit of color, so I don't need much water because water is already there. So we're using only burnt umber. And then burnt umber on that side. Then here I'm realizing it's quite wet, so I will add just a little bit here, and I know that it will bleed. So I'm using brush size number 3, guys. And then a little bit of that color over here. So we can see now more definition, darker tonal values. And because we have very light areas, it works really well together. And then I will add burnt umber to the wings, to the sides. So I'll just place it like this, wet on dry, and partly it will be wet on wet. The consistency of the color, it will be milk to cream. So you can see that it looks almost like on a screen, like it's black, but it's very saturated brown. And the same on that wing. I'm keeping that area lighter. Like so. You can also place a few like dots with this brown color. A few dots. And I'm checking the face of the owl with a finger. And what I'm going to do is I will work more on the face. However, I wouldn't say that it's completely dry, but it's fine. So I will use a bit of light red. I will still use my brush, and I will mix it with a little bit of purple just to tone it down on the, like to make it a bit more purpley. And I will try to work around the nose to paint a few like feathers that are covering the nose. And then the eyes. I'm still using brush size number 3. And then this area. And then I want to add just a little bit of the blue color here because it's too pink for me. So I added a bit of Prussian blue, like so. Then I will use a little bit of Dioxazine Purple mixed with a little bit of light red, and I will use my brush size number 3, and I will place just a few brush strokes on the chest. Again, it's now beginning to become like very dry area, so I will have more definition with these brush strokes. Some of them will be like dots a little bit, imitating different length of feathers. So I'm using just the tip of my brush, yeah, and I'm using it in a very chaotic way. And then a little bit on top of the wing. So I'm using, you can use a little bit of Dioxazine Purple with light red, or you can use a little bit of Prussian Blue mixed with light red, and you will have like a different, slightly different tone of purple. Again, still keep it very light, very light. And then it's quite empty here, so I'll add a few brush strokes on the left hand side, like so. And then on this side. So we were working wet on dry. So I mixed light red and Prussian blue. And then I will add light red and Prussian blue here. You can see it's still quite wet. So I'm moving to the area where it's drier. Adding more and more details to our barn owl. So you can see we have roughly three different tonal values. So if you squint your eyes, first will be this light base that we use for the first layer. Second layer is these, so they will be like half turns. And then we have darker areas where we had a very dark brown color, so we are adding shadows, and the balance of all these colors really working, and by creating a good contrast, a good difference between very light areas and very dark areas, helps you to create a very nice watercolor palette. So at the moment I'm looking and I'm thinking, what can I do while areas are still. So I was thinking that I can also add now some gray. So I would use a little bit of Payne's grey. So first with my tissue, I'm cleaning the space on my palette by just wiping it off. Then I'm using my brush size number 3. So I'm dipping my brush in water, and then I'm getting some Payne's grey. I love Payne's grey so much. One of my favorite colors. So you can see Payne's grey has a slight blue undertone. You can try different brands. Some of the Payne greys will be slightly more bluish. It just depends on the brand. So what I'm going to be using, so it will be the consistency of cream. So I'm getting that Payne's grey, mixing it on my palette with a brush size number 3. And we're gonna add this color to the wings. So I will be using the same brush, and because here you can see that these areas are still wet, but like I said, you can create a very nice picture by combining effects of where it's bled and where you have a lot of definition and you work wet on dry. So I quite like to combine them, so I don't mind if it's gonna bleed a little bit. So now I'm adding this Payne's grey. If you want to increase the effects, maybe you can add a bit of blue there. So I'm using a little bit of cold blue with some Payne's grey. And I'm also, you know, that what's significant for this bird is that they have like these black dots. So I will imitate and paint a few dots on the wing. Yeah, you can see that it's really nice when it's bleeding with these colors. So I've used Payne's grey, cream consistency, with a little bit of cold blue. You can either use Prussian blue or you can use any cold blue, so don't use ultramarine. And it's such a nice color combination. And I will add the same colors just in a few spots on the wing on the left. Wet on wet and wet on dry. And then at the and then I know the outline of the face is now completely dry, so I want to add more definition. So I would use burnt amber, and I will add a little bit of Payne's grey just to make it darker. I know that this area now become dry, so I'll use my brush size number 3, and I will place a few like darker brush strokes. Like so. I don't put them all the way, yeah, just in a few places. And also I would use Payne's grey with a little bit of burnt amber, and I will put dots. You can see that we have dots here. So I would use a few dots on top of the head, like so. What else can I do? I'm waiting for the area around eyes to really dry out. And I think for the first layer, I can actually now start working on it. So we really need to add a lot of color to eyes, so everything will pop once we will do the eyes. So you know that barn owls, they have quite dark eyes, so they're very black. And what we're gonna do is we would use a little bit of sap green. So I want to add some undertones, so some green undertones. So first, with my brush size number 3, I'm getting the sap green and I'm mixing it on a palette. Yeah, I don't need a lot, but I need bright green. And then I will mix it with a little bit of brown. So I will use burnt amber. So it will be this like very earthy green color. And I will fill eyes with that color, wet on dry. Yeah, making sure that the areas round is dry. If you feel that you're not sure if it's dry, I always leave a slight gap so you can see the gap between this pinkish color and green color. And then I will do the same for the other eye. And what I'm gonna do next, I will try to create a lighter value. So I'm washing my brush, damping against the tissue, so it will be a slightly damp brush. And then with slight application of pressure, I will lift some color out. Yeah, so I still have color. So now I'm gonna wipe it against the tissue, then wash my brush and do the same with the other eye. So just want to create like a lighter area inside. You see that it lifted some color out. And I can do it a few times. So with the eyes, how I've done it on this owl, if you can see it, I've painted it green and then I swapped to the smaller size brush. So next brush we're going to be using is a tiny brush. So either 2-0 or 1. And when the eye starts drying out, it's still wet, but it's now damp. And I use lamp black, so very warm black. And I painted like an outline around the eye. And because it was damp, I so all this black color didn't cover all the eye, but it created a nice gradient round. And this is a brilliant technique to use if you want to add like multiple colors and if you want to add details, but you want to have more control. I recommend you trying working on damp, not on wet paper, but on damp, because it started to dry out and you have room to adjust, to implement color, one more color, and you will see with a smaller size brush that it will help you to do it quicker. So let's just try it. So first I'm gonna wash my brush and making sure that it's wet. So I'm now gonna need lamp black or ivory black, whatever black you have, not Payne's gray. So this should be like a warmer version of black color. So you can see that I'm using my brush to mix that. And the consistency will be between cream and honey. We already have water in the eye, so it's now getting damp, yeah. So I don't need a big brush, because big brush means that it will hold more water and color and it will shut this green color with black color and you won't see it. But working with a smaller size brush and on damp, you have more control. So just look, just watch. So what I'm gonna do is I wanna add outline for the eye, so you can see that I'm trying first and I'm seeing, so how far that bleed gonna shoot inwards. If it's too wet, it will grow drastically, yeah. But if it's like half, well, I don't know how. If it's just a little bit, that means that it's going into damp stage, so you have a lot more control. So I am satisfied with how far it traveled. So with my brush, I'm just painting the line round. Yeah, and I don't need to do anything, so it's already producing me soft edge. And then I will do the other side. And then I'm going to do the next eye too. So we're working wet on damp. You can see that here it's already started drying out. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna wash my brush. And in this case, I will use slightly bigger brush because it will help me to collect some paint and water. So I'm going to be using brush size number 3. So I'm washing my brush, drying it against the tissue, but it's still damp. And then I will move my brush to collect this pigment first, then unload it, then wash it, then unload of water. And basically, we are trying to get rid of hard edge. So everything, so that black color will be distributed evenly. So the same I will do with this eye. Just placing the tip of my brush on the edge, and then I'm just moving my brush to make it nice and even. And then with my brush, I'm just adding a little bit of wetness so it will be even, so you can see. Quickly. So you can see that I made a mess as usual. But you can adjust it if it's done quickly. So with a tissue and some water, I am succeeding in removing that spot. So you can see we have a really nice effect now of the eye. So it's like it has like gradient inwards. While it's drying out, we're gonna add some more detail to the nose. So I will be using a little bit of Dioxazine Purple with some Payne Rose. Now, actually, shall we use Dioxazine Purple with a little bit of burnt umber? So the consistency will be tea to milk. And I'm going to be using my brush size number 1. So first, because it's quite light, I will add some color, just a little bit to the nose, using tip of my brush, but I want to keep it quite light. And then I will add some more details to the nose. So it will be just painting a few hairs. And you can see it's now nice and dry. So we have some definition. Oops. And then I will paint a few brush strokes using my brush size number 1, or you can use size 20. So I'm using a little bit of Dioxazine Purple and a little bit of burnt umber. Like so. Mm-hmm. And then I will add a few details to the other side. And then It's almost complete. So now we need to add a few more details to the nose. So I'm still using my Dioxazine Purple with a little bit of burnt umber. Consistency will be milk to cream, and I'm using my brush size number 1, but you can use 2-0. And then I would use a little bit of light red. So I'm just going to get light red, see? But I will tone it down with Dioxazine Purple, so I don't want it to be very rusty. And I will work wet on dry, and I will try not to touch the eye, and I will place a few brush strokes going outwards, and it is slightly curved. You can see that round barn owl's eyes, they have quite reddish areas, so I would use these 2 colors to start with. And at the same time, I want more definition and I want pointy brush strokes. So I'll take my painting and I will move it that way. So my hand will be placed on the side, and the brush strokes I will start from the eye towards me. So I will have more control holding my hand like this, rather than painting from here to here, rather than painting other way around. So you see that when I was painting that eye, my hand was placed and I was moving from the eye, where if it's far away, it will be difficult for me to reach. That's why I'm very often turning my painting, loading my brush, and I'm making sure that I know the direction where the brush stroke should be going. I'm starting from the eye, and I have more control when I move my hand towards me, not from me, towards me. And then I will move it again. And then I will paint a few brush strokes around the eye using these colors. So I'm using light red with a little bit of Dioxazine Purple. And you can see that it's a little bit wet here. And then I'll do the same to the other eye. So you can see that my hand is placed on the desk. I have full support of my hand to do that. And then I love to support this color. So if we have it in one place, I love to add just a few brush strokes, so it won't be looking like odd one out. So just a little bit of like a supporting color, just a little bit. So now I'm touching the paper, so where we have these eyes, and what we're going to do is we have this black color. So I want to use quite a lot of lamp black. So the consistency will be cream to honey. But I'm gonna check it first with my brush. So I will approximately see, because now I'm struggling to see where's the outline, but I will touch the paper and I can see that it's growing. That means it's not quite ready. So I will try not to go all the way, but I will try to start painting sort of in the middle, knowing that it will grow a little bit. I'm not too worried about leaving like white spots because we're going to be using white gouache at the end. So in here, it's actually on this side, it dried out. Try not to breathe. So you see that on this eye, it's slightly wet. That's why we have the slight legs of lamp black growing. So I will need to adjust it in a bit, but I won't touch it just yet. So what I'm gonna do is just I'm gonna work with burnt amber with a little bit of light red. Consistency will be cream. And I'm just going to place a few brush strokes. Like so. And then I will use a little bit of Prussian Blue with burnt amber, and I will just paint a few brush strokes here where we have like a lighter area and it was wet when we were working there. So I will just place a few brush strokes here and there. And now I'm going to use my brush size number 3 and I will mix burnt amber with a little bit of lamp black. So consistency will be milk to cream. And I will just use the tip of my brush. I know that the area is now dried out, so I'm just going to come back here and place a few dots and brush strokes around the head, working wet on dry. Wet on dry. I also added like a drop next to the eye, making it a little bit darker. And then we're gonna add lamp black with burnt amber to the wings. This wet on dry. You can see that it's fully dry. a little bit of one black. And a few dots. And then I would use a little bit of Dioxazine Purple mixed with a little bit of light red. And I will just place a few brush strokes in this area using my brush size number 3. Like I said, it's difficult to stop now, placing all this brush strokes. So if you squint your eyes, you will still able to see different tonal values and a great contrast between very dark areas and very light areas. And the last thing that is left is adding white gouache. So I would have to wait a bit longer to place this white gouache. So you can see that on the piece that I've done, I've used just a little bit of toothpaste consistency white gouache. I used my brush size number 1, and I will show you, but I cannot add this to the eyes on my owl just because they are wet. So to add gouache, you need to make sure that it's fully dry. So I'm just going to demonstrate you with this paint. So I'm just going to squeeze a little bit. You don't need much. It already has this consistency of the toothpaste. So all you need to do is just place your brush in the water, and then you just wiggle your brush a little bit. You can avoid using water at all, and you can see that I have like a blob of white paint. You can see it better. White blob, and I will just put it wet on dry. But unfortunately, these eyes are still quite wet. So if I add it, it will spread. So when you're using white gouache to add some highlights, to add like extra details, to paint a few white hairs or feathers, make sure that watercolor and paper is fully dry, because if it's not, you're going to create a mess. So unfortunately, I cannot add white right now because it's too wet. But I'm sure you can do it later. So this is it, guys, and I hope that you enjoy this little tutorial, and I hope that you enjoy painting this barn owl. I'm quite satisfied with the result and the colors that I've used, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I looking forward to seeing what you made. You can tag me on Facebook, Instagram, yeah, and I will announce next little tutorial shortly, probably in a couple of weeks, and it will be puffing. And then you can also share any ideas what you want to learn to paint, and get it we'll get it sorted. So thank you so much, and see you guys later. Bye.